Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. I really appreciate you being with me. And we are continuing our discussion of the Olivet Discourse. By the way, this is video number 300 in our examination and study of the Olivet Discourse. And we are down to Matthew 24:43 and following. And the Lord's discussion of his coming as a thief. You know, I've just got to mention this. I might not, should even take mention of it. But I've had some of the people who scoff at me and who take pot shots at me saying, Preston's produced 250 or, blah, 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 all these videos on the Olivet Discourse. Evidently there's some people who believe that you are able to discuss and to explain biblical eschatology in 25 words or less. They want their eschatology so simple, so basic. You can put it all in a thimble. Well, I'm sorry. The biblical narrative, the biblical story of eschatology, and understanding the biblical story is not that simple. We are living 2,000 years later. And to think so naively and so ignorantly, and I use that word in the true sense, okay, not as a slur, but to think that so ignorantly that we can just pick up the Bible and know exactly what it means without knowing the culture, the time, the customs, the idioms of those ancient people is one of the most naive, ill-informed concepts possible. And thus when I hear people say, or when they write, the Bible says what it means what it says. Well, that's exactly right. In the culture, in the times, in what the German scholars call the Zeitzenleben, in the life situation of the original audience, it did say what it meant, and it meant what it said. But you and I are living 2,000 years beyond that. We are not living in their day and in their time. We don't understand their language unless we take the time and the effort to study it. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. So, when we come to idioms such as, a thief in the night, or beware, lest you be found sleeping, the watchman, he finds you sleeping. And we see how that refers to the temple of the first century. And on and on and on it goes. So, when we come to passages that refer to the thief in the night, first of all, we need to know, was that any kind of an idiom in the first century? What was the cultural, what was the social, what was the theological context of that discussion? Well, here's what we've seen. What we have seen so far is that Jesus' reference to the coming as a thief is set within the context of it being like it was in the days of Noah. Well, in the days of Noah, they had warning that it was coming. They had signs that it was coming, but they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. Matthew 24:37. It came upon them like a thief, in other words. Well, how did it come on them as a thief? It's because they refused to watch for the signs. They refused to listen to the message. And that's exactly and precisely what Paul taught in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Brethren, concerning the times and the seasons, that's of the day of the Lord, you have no need that I write anything unto you, because you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as a woman in travail. Now, wait a minute. Once again, the Lord's coming would be like a thief, but it would be as a woman, a pregnant woman, whose birth pangs would come upon her. She knew it was coming. And so what we have seen in our examination is we've tried to go, below the veneer of people's common understanding and of naively thinking, I know exactly what a thief coming is. Well, you don't know exactly what a thief coming is and how it's being referred to unless you dig into the context, the actual context of these verses and passages that we have been discussing. And when we do look at the context and we see the first century imminence, you yourselves, as Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, then we very quickly determined that the Lord's coming as a thief was to be at the great day of the Lord in the vindication of the martyrs, which Jesus emphatically posited at his coming in AD 70, Matthew 23. And so then we therefore come to 2 Peter chapter 3. Pardon me one moment. Get a little lubrication for the vocal cords there. We have the famous passage in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 10. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the earth and the elements therein shall be burned up. Thief coming. Oh, well, everyone knows there's no warning, there are no signs. It's unexpected. Well, let me ask you to please consider this question. Is the Lord's coming as a thief in 2 Peter 3 different from the Lord's coming in Matthew 24, 37 and following? Well, let's be careful here. Those who claim that the Lord's thief coming in Matthew 24, 37 and following believe that it is his coming in the day of the Lord when the earth and the elements therein will be burned with fervent heat. So no, they do not argue that these are different thief comings. Pardon me. So if it's true that the Lord's coming as a thief in Matthew 24, 37 and following, is the Lord's coming as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3. Oh, and then, if the Lord's coming as a thief of 2 Peter chapter 3 is the Lord's coming as a thief in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, then since we have already seen that Paul taught the Thessalonians knew the times and the seasons of the Lord's coming as a thief. Brethren, you have no need that I write to you concerning the times and the seasons, for you know perfectly well concerning the Lord's coming, he comes as a thief. And you will not be caught unaware. So, the Lord's coming as a thief was to be in the lifetime of the Thessalonians. They would simply not be caught up in it. Okay, so if the coming of the Lord as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3 is the same coming of the Lord in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, since the coming of the Lord as a thief in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 was to be in the lifetime of the Thessalonians, that means the Lord's coming as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3 was to be in the first century. Oh, and is the Lord's coming as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3 the same as the Lord's coming as a thief in Luke chapter 12, 37 to 40? If it's not, what's the difference? Now, I would hope that no one, although it may be a vain hope, I'll be really honest with you, but I would hope that no one would jump up and say, look, the Lord's coming as a thief in Luke chapter 12 is not the same coming as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3, because in Luke chapter 12, you see, we have these imminent time statements. You yourselves be ready. You yourselves gird up the loins of your garments. So yeah, that applies to first century people. But you see, in Luke chapter 12, Jesus didn't mention anything about the earth and the elements burning up. Therefore, it's different from 2 Peter 3. Now, I've made mention many times before of what is known as the missing elements and missing word hermeneutic. In one debate, private, public, after another, my opponents have used this hermeneutic. And they have said, well, you know, over here in Acts chapter 17, 30 and 31, Paul doesn't mention AD 70. He doesn't mention Jerusalem. He doesn't mention the temple. Therefore, it cannot be talking about AD 70. Folks, that's one of the most misguided hermeneutics that could possibly be given. Guess what? 2 Peter 3 doesn't discuss the resurrection. Therefore, 2 Peter 3 cannot be at the time of the resurrection. 2 Peter chapter 3 doesn't mention the Lord coming with his angels. It doesn't mention him coming on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory. 2 Peter 3 doesn't mention the gathering of the elect. Well, according to this missing word hermeneutic, that means that 2 Peter chapter 3 must be different from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. But nobody wants to argue that. They know that's a foolish, misguided hermeneutic. And by the way, and I got to hurry here, if you argue, all right, you just got to catch the power of this. If someone wants to jump up and argue and say, well, you know what, the coming of the Lord as a thief in 2 Peter chapter 3, that's got to be the end of time, because after all, that's the earth and the elements that are therein being burned up. And Luke chapter 12, yeah, that's got statements of imminence that tie it to the first century. After all, Jesus said, you yourselves be ready. And he said, gird up the loins of your garment. So yeah, that applies to the first century. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That means that they're admitting that a simple reference to a thief coming did not automatically mean an end of time coming. I mean, after all, if the language of imminence demands a first century thief coming, you've just surrendered the argument that the Lord's reference to a thief coming in Matthew chapter 24 has to be different from his first century thief coming in AD 70. You just surrendered the whole playing field. So in order to make Luke chapter 12 the same as 2 Peter chapter 3, you have to completely and totally negate the urgency, the imminency, and the imagery of the girding up the loins of their mind and the reference to you, yourself, which is so emphatic. It means they were to be ready for the thief coming. Okay, that's all I've got time for today. Do not forget, time is running out for my introductory book special introducing Watching for the Parousia, where Jesus' apostles confused, Paul on trial, Paul, the Pharisees, and the resurrection, and included free of charge, Can God Tell Time? Now, normally, pardon me, if you purchased all three of these separately, it'd cost you $50, all right? For the month of July 2020, U.S. orders only. If you want them in PDF form at even a reduced price, contact me through my website. But if you want to substitute, he came as a thief for Can God Tell Time, just go ahead and order this 3-book special and send me a note that you want to substitute, he came as a thief. And again, please be patient. I'm still waiting on my supply of the book, Were Jesus' Apostles Confused? They should be here almost any day. All right. We're going to have a whole lot more on the thief coming of Matthew 24 and 2 Peter chapter 3. And we'll see some of it tomorrow on the flip side.